Welcome. Let's discuss supplier management and supplier development. In other words, how firms create a world-class supply base. A firm is only as strong as its suppliers. If suppliers have quality problems, delivery issues, weak processes, or weak technology, the buying firm inherits those problems. So managing suppliers is not a support activity, it is a competitive strategy. By the end of this unit, you should recognize that supplier management and supplier development include many activities designed to improve supplier performance. You should understand how supplier measurement connects to supplier management, how different measurement tools are created, and why the size and quality of the supply base matter. You should also know when to apply supplier development approaches, understand different types of supply base risk and how to manage them, recognize supply chain fraud and its impact, and understand why sustainability must now be managed within the supply base. So, how does a buyer know how well a supplier is performing? Companies continuously monitor, measure, evaluate, and analyze supplier performance metrics. They use systems that collect and provide information to measure, rate, and rank ongoing supplier performance. So, supplier performance management functions, like a report card for suppliers. Supplier measurement begins with company strategy. Corporate and business unit goals must drive supply management goals. Supplier segmentation considerations can include risk levels of different suppliers, category spend amounts, as well as what it may cost a firm to switch suppliers. When designing an evaluation strategy, they must decide what information is required, how it will be used, how it can be collected efficiently and on time, and what resources will gather it. Companies measure both quantitative and qualitative variables. Quantitative variables compare performance to standards and goals. These include delivery performance, quality performance, and cost reduction. Qualitative factors are subjective. Buyers assign ratings, apply weighting factors to each category, and rank suppliers based on total points earned. Measurement also depends on timing. Internally, buyers monitor day-to-day performance for troubleshooting and expediting. Suppliers receive summarized performance reports monthly or quarterly. Most firms also hold an annual face-to-face performance review. One key rule: never delay reporting or addressing poor supplier performance. Ultimately, performance data is used to support a variety of decisions. It identifies both poor and high-performing suppliers, supports supply base rationalization, determines future purchase volume allocations, identifies improvement opportunities, and helps make sourcing decisions. When designing a system, firms must decide what data to analyze, what metrics to use, what performance categories to include, how to weight categories, how frequently to generate reports, and how performance data will actually be used. We will discuss several measurement and evaluation systems, including categorical, weighted point, and cost-based systems. The categorical system assigns subjective ratings to each performance category. The evaluation may be done by a buyer, internal users, or both. It provides minimal insight and often shows large differences between evaluators because it is subjective. An example of this might be buyers assigning performance ratings of each evaluation attribute on a scale of good, neutral, and poor. The weighted point system reduces subjectivity. It quantifies performance across categories and allows weights to be adjusted. However, firms must carefully select categories, choose appropriate weights, and establish decision rules. An example of this is the weighted point scorecard that we have discussed in previous units. As you can see, this is slightly more objective than the categorical system. The cost-based system is the most thorough and least subjective. It identifies the total cost of doing business with a supplier. The challenge is identifying and recording the costs that occur when the supplier fails to perform. This method is based on the Supplier Performance Index. The Supplier Performance Index equals total purchases plus non-performance costs divided by total purchases. An SPI of 1.0 is perfect. It is a total cost index calculated for each item or commodity supplied. Supply base rationalization determines how many and which suppliers to keep. Optimization ensures only the most capable suppliers remain. It should be continuous and depends on effective measurement systems. It usually reduces suppliers, though sometimes new suppliers must be added. The goal is the right number of suppliers, not just fewer suppliers. A rationalized supply base allows buying from world-class suppliers, using full-service suppliers, reducing supply risk, lowering administrative costs, lowering total product cost, and enabling complex supply management strategies. There are various risks associated with having too few suppliers. Supplier dependency may occur, including financial instability or unhealthy dependence. Lack of competition can allow suppliers to raise prices or become complacent. Switching costs increase and contracts must be carefully structured. Supply disruptions may occur, so firms use redundant capabilities, multiple facilities, primary and secondary suppliers. Over-aggressive reduction can also eliminate qualified suppliers and create capacity shortages. Supplier development is often misunderstood. It is not just evaluating suppliers or threatening to switch vendors. It occurs when a buying firm deliberately invests time, expertise, and sometimes money to improve an existing supplier's performance and capabilities. Firms do this because competitive advantage comes from the entire supply network. If suppliers are unreliable or technologically weak, the buyer will be as well. Instead of constantly replacing suppliers, companies often gain more by improving key suppliers and growing together. The process begins by identifying purchasing categories that justify development. Because it is costly, firms focus on areas where suppliers strongly affect customer satisfaction, total cost, or long-term competitiveness. The buyer must also be willing to collaborate and share information. Without partnership, development fails. Next, the firm selects specific suppliers using performance evaluations in quality, delivery, cost, responsiveness, and technical capability. Development targets strategically important suppliers with potential, not failing suppliers. A cross-functional team is then formed, including purchasing, engineering, operations, and quality. Many supplier problems originate from the buyer's own processes, so internal alignment must occur first. The buyer and supplier leadership then meet to establish expectations, communication, and trust. This is a partnership discussion, not an audit. Trust is critical because hidden problems damage supply chains. Together, both firms identify improvement opportunities based on customer requirements. They agree on measurable goals, estimate costs and benefits, and decide how gains will be shared, often through shared savings arrangements. Specific projects, responsibilities, metrics, and timelines are formalized, and progress is continuously monitored. Supplier development is not a one-time project, but an ongoing improvement relationship. Before we talk about specific techniques, let's briefly anchor what supply-based rationalization actually means. Supply-based rationalization is the structured process of reducing, developing, or restructuring a firm's set of suppliers so the company works with the right suppliers, not just many suppliers. Historically, firms accumulated vendors over years. Purchasing departments often added suppliers faster than they evaluated them. The result was a fragmented supply base, inconsistent quality, and high administrative cost. Rationalization asks a very direct strategic question. Which suppliers should we keep, which should we improve, and which should we exit? The formal approaches we'll discuss are systematic ways organizations answer that question. The first approach is based on the Pareto principle, often called the 80-20th rule. The idea is that a small percentage of suppliers typically account for the majority of purchasing value, performance impact, or operational risk. In many companies, about 20% of suppliers account for roughly 80% of spend, or 20% drive 80% of quality problems, or 20% create 80% of innovation. So instead of treating every supplier equally, the firm prioritizes management attention. Here's what happens operationally. The organization identifies its high-impact suppliers, usually strategic, high-spend, or high-risk suppliers, and allocates most development resources to them. Lower-impact suppliers are simplified, automated, or removed. The goal is efficiency. Rather than spreading effort across hundreds of vendors, the company concentrates effort where it actually matters. Importantly, this approach does not automatically mean eliminating 80% of suppliers. It means managing suppliers differently based on importance. The improve or else approach is exactly what it sounds like. The buying firm tells suppliers, your performance must meet our standards by a specified date or the relationship ends. This is usually used when performance problems are clear, switching suppliers is possible, and improvement must occur quickly. The firm provides performance targets such as quality levels, on-time delivery rates, responsiveness, or cost reductions. What makes this approach effective is urgency. Suppliers suddenly realize the relationship is conditional. Many suppliers actually can improve quickly, but they need a strong incentive. This method is common in automotive and electronics industries where production disruptions are extremely costly. However, there is also risk. If used too aggressively, suppliers may become defensive, hide problems, or avoid investing in the relationship. So, this approach works best when the buyer is serious, consistent, and transparent. The triage approach comes from medicine. Emergency rooms don't treat all patients in the same order. They treat based on urgency and survivability. Purchasing does something similar. Suppliers are categorized into groups such as develop, maintain, and eliminate. Instead of one policy for everyone, the firm evaluates suppliers across multiple criteria: quality, delivery, cost, service, and responsiveness. Then each supplier receives a different management strategy. High performers mean long-term partnerships and development. Average performers mean monitored and improved. And low performers mean phased out. The key advantage of triage is that it prevents a common mistake. Companies often spend the most time managing their worst suppliers. Triage flips that. Attention goes where improvement is realistic and valuable. The final approach is the most developmental and collaborative. Rather than a one-time evaluation, the competency staircase approach treats supplier performance as a progression. Suppliers move through a series of performance milestones, like climbing steps. Typical stages might include basic capability, meaning they can reliably produce the product, consistent quality and delivery, process control and data sharing, continuous improvement participation, and innovation partnership. Each step requires new capabilities. Better quality systems, improved communication, engineering coordination, and eventually joint product development. Instead of asking good or bad supplier, the firm asks, how advanced is this supplier? And what support helps them move to the next level? This approach is widely used in industries with long product life cycles such as aerospace, automotive, and advanced manufacturing. Its strength is relationship building. Its weakness is time. It requires investment, training, and patience. Supplier development often fails for a simple reason. Suppliers don't automatically change. Improvement requires effort, cost, and sometimes operational disruption, so buyers must actively motivate suppliers. Firms typically use 3 tools: involvement, incentives, and pressure. First is direct involvement. Instead of only giving feedback, the buying firm works directly with the supplier. This may include shared personnel on joint projects where engineers or quality specialists help redesign processes, improve quality systems, or implement lean practices. Many supplier problems are capability gaps, not resistance, and hands-on assistance helps suppliers improve faster while building a cooperative relationship. Second is the carrot, or incentives. Buyers reward improvement by increasing future order volumes or providing preferred supplier status. Some companies also hold annual supplier award ceremonies to publicly recognize strong performance. Recognition and predictable business give suppliers a clear reason to invest in improvement. Finally is the stick. If performance does not improve, the buyer may issue warnings, pull back current business, or withhold future contracts. This signals that the relationship depends on performance and creates urgency for corrective action. Supplier development does not fail only because of suppliers. Sometimes the biggest obstacles exist inside the buying organization itself. These are buyer-specific barriers. The first barrier is insufficient purchase volume. If a buyer does not purchase enough from a supplier, the supplier has little reason to invest in improvement. Buyers can address this by standardizing parts across product lines or using single sourcing. By concentrating volume with fewer suppliers, the relationship becomes economically important enough to justify development. The second barrier is the absence of immediate or visible benefits. Managers may hesitate to invest because the payoff is not obvious. A practical solution is to pursue small wins first. Targeted improvements in delivery, defects, or responsiveness to build confidence and demonstrate value. The third barrier occurs when the purchased item seems unimportant. If the item is viewed as low value, development appears unnecessary. However, buyers should adopt a longer-term perspective and look beyond price. Even small components can influence product quality, reliability, and technological capability. The fourth barrier is a lack of executive support. Supplier development requires time, people, and money, and without leadership backing, it rarely succeeds. The best response is to document and communicate results. By measuring cost savings, quality improvements, and operational benefits, managers can demonstrate that supplier development is a strategic investment rather than an expense. Even when both firms want improvement, supplier development can stall because of problems at the relationship interface, the interaction between the buyer and supplier. The first barrier is a supplier's reluctance to share proprietary information. Suppliers worry that the buyer could misuse their data or pass it to competitors. One solution is to create a supplier ombudsman, a neutral contact person who manages communication, resolves concerns, and builds confidence in the relationship. The second barrier is confidentiality concerns. Information sharing is necessary for improvement, but companies fear exposing sensitive processes. Buyers can address this by establishing confidentiality agreements and consistently demonstrating ethical behavior. Trust develops when suppliers see that shared information is respected and protected. The third barrier is lack of trust. Without trust, collaboration becomes minimal and defensive. The best response is clarity. Clearly document expectations, responsibilities, and performance requirements so both sides understand exactly what is expected. The fourth barrier is cultural misalignment. Firms may have different management styles, communication norms, or decision processes. Instead of forcing one system, the buyer should adapt the development approach to local business conditions and work within the supplier's operating culture. The final barrier is lack of inducement. Suppliers may not see a reason to invest in improvement. Buyers can create motivation through designed-in incentives, financial rewards, or payment terms that are more favorable to the supplier. Overcoming interface barriers ultimately comes down to trust, communication, and shared benefits. Supplier development works best when both parties see the relationship as a partnership rather than a transaction. Some barriers to supplier development originate inside the supplier organization itself. Even when the buyer is supportive, improvement cannot occur unless the supplier has the capability and commitment to follow through. The first barrier is lack of commitment from supplier management. If leadership is not fully supportive, improvement efforts quickly lose priority. Buyers should begin development only after obtaining clear managerial commitment from the supplier. The second barrier is poor implementation. Improvement plans often fail because no one owns the process. A solution is to appoint supplier project champions, designated individuals responsible for coordinating and driving improvement activities. The third barrier is limited engineering expertise. Some suppliers simply lack the technical resources needed to improve processes or quality systems. In these cases, the buyer may need to provide direct technical support and guidance. The fourth barrier is weak information technology support. Without strong information systems, communication and coordination suffer. Buyers can help by establishing electronic data interchange, shared platforms, or cloud-based systems to improve data sharing. Another barrier is lack of belief in the benefits of supplier development. Suppliers may doubt whether the effort is worthwhile. Maintaining real-time communication and regularly showing performance results helps suppliers understand where they stand and why improvement matters. Finally, insufficient employee skill levels can prevent lasting change. Joint training centers and human resource support, including recruiting and retaining skilled engineers and technicians, help build the workforce needed for sustained improvement. Managing a supply base also means managing risk. Every sourcing decision carries uncertainty, so the goal is not to eliminate risk. It is to understand and control it. First, managers must identify common sources of risk. These may include supplier failure, quality problems, transportation disruptions, geopolitical events, natural disasters, or financial instability. Because risk is inherent in all sourcing decisions, no supplier relationship is completely risk-free. Risk should always be evaluated relative to two factors: the cost exposure if a disruption occurs and the probability that it will happen. A low-probability event with severe consequences may deserve as much attention as a frequent but minor issue. It is also important to distinguish risk from uncertainty. Risk involves situations where potential outcomes and likelihoods can be estimated, while uncertainty refers to situations where outcomes are unpredictable. Supply managers focus on risk by assessing vulnerabilities and developing mitigation strategies. Managers should therefore ask several questions, including, where is the organization vulnerable to potential risk? Why is the organization vulnerable? How will this risk affect the organization if it happens? How will this risk affect organizations' customers, suppliers, and other stakeholders? What are the likely causes of the risk? What should the organization do if and when risk occurs? Supply disruptions can have serious consequences for an organization. When risk materializes, companies often must spend substantial time, effort, and money to respond, expediting shipments, finding emergency suppliers, or redesigning operations. Disruptions can also create negative public relations. Product shortages, quality failures, or delayed deliveries may become visible to customers and the media, damaging the firm's reputation. As reliability declines, customer confidence weakens. Buyers begin to question whether the company can consistently meet its commitments. Ultimately, this leads to lost sales and reduced profitability. Customers may switch to competitors, and recovery costs further reduce margins. For this reason, managing supply risk is not only an operational concern, it is directly tied to financial performance and long-term competitiveness. There are many sources of risk. For example, political risks include country and government stability, corruption, legal differences, elections, military actions, civil unrest, terrorism, trade imbalances, and tariffs. Market risk involves competition and technology changes. Sourcing risk includes long pipelines and communication differences. Financial risk includes inventory, handling, taxes, obsolescence, and exchange rates. Supplier company risk includes financial stability, supplier capability, and mergers. Supply chain risk cannot be eliminated, but it can be managed. Disruptions may come from supplier failure, transportation delays, political events, natural disasters, currency changes, or demand variability. Because uncertainty is unavoidable, firms use a combination of operational, strategic, and financial tools to reduce its impact. One traditional method is inventory. Extra stock acts as a buffer against late deliveries or demand spikes and allows operations to continue during disruptions. However, inventory is costly due to storage, handling, and tied-up capital, so it reduces risk at the expense of efficiency. Another approach is multiple sourcing. By purchasing from several suppliers instead of one, firms reduce dependence on a single source and gain flexibility during disruptions. The trade-off is less consistency and potentially weaker collaboration with suppliers. Companies also use third-party intermediaries such as freight forwarders and logistics specialists. These organizations handle shipping coordination, documentation, and customs compliance, reducing the likelihood of delays and international shipping problems. Scenario analysis is another important tool. Firms conduct what-if planning to prepare contingency plans before disruptions occur, allowing faster response when unexpected events happen. Some risks are financial, especially exchange rate changes in global sourcing. Currency hedging, using forward contracts, futures, or options, stabilizes costs and prevents unexpected losses rather than trying to generate profit. Insurance provides protection as well. By insuring shipments, firms limit financial losses from damage, theft, or loss during transit, though coverage depends on contract and Incoterm responsibilities. Overall, supply chain risk management relies on combining multiple tools, buffers like inventory, structural strategies like multiple sourcing, operational expertise through intermediaries, planning through scenario analysis, financial protection through hedging, and recovery through insurance. Supply chain fraud is often invisible, poorly understood, and can cost up to 5% of revenue. It can occur anywhere in the supply chain, and accounting often recognizes it before supply management. In terms of fraud mitigation, there are two broad categories: deterrence and detection. Deterrence requires strong ethical culture, policies, decisive action, separation of duties, and whistleblower programs. Detection uses automated monitoring, pattern recognition, AI tools, manual process monitoring, reconciliation, and special approvals. Finally, let's discuss sustainable and environmental activities and practices. Sustainability has become an important responsibility in supply management. Buyers are increasingly expected to manage not only cost and quality, but also environmental impact across the supply chain. Material-related practices focus on selecting environmentally responsible inputs. This includes reducing hazardous materials, increasing recycled content, and minimizing waste in packaging and production. Climate and energy initiatives aim to lower carbon emissions and energy consumption. Firms may work with suppliers to improve energy efficiency, shift to renewable energy sources, or track greenhouse gas output. Procurement-specific actions involve choosing suppliers that meet environmental standards and encouraging sustainable practices as part of the sourcing decision. Transportation and logistics efforts reduce environmental impact by optimizing routes, consolidating shipments, and using more efficient modes of transportation. Organizations also rely on metrics and measurement systems to monitor performance, using environmental indicators and reporting systems to track improvement over time. Contracts play a role as well. Buyers can include appropriate environmental terms requiring suppliers to meet sustainability expectations and regulatory requirements. Product lifecycle analysis evaluates environmental impact from raw materials through production, use, and disposal, helping firms design more sustainable products. Finally, environmental compliance auditing ensures suppliers follow environmental laws and company standards. Together, these activities extend sustainability beyond the firm and throughout the entire supply chain. Let's quickly tie everything together by walking back through each learning objective and what it actually means. First, we learned that supplier management and supplier development involve many activities aimed at improving supplier performance. This includes monitoring suppliers, communicating expectations, correcting problems, and working collaboratively so suppliers become more reliable and capable over time. Second, we discussed how supplier measurement connects directly to supplier management. You can't manage suppliers if you don't measure them. Performance data is what tells the firm who is doing well, who is struggling, and where improvement efforts should be focused. Third, we looked at different supplier measurement tools. We covered simple categorical ratings, weighted point systems that score suppliers numerically, and cost-based systems that translate performance failures into actual financial impact. Fourth, we talked about the importance of maintaining a manageable supply base. The goal is not having the fewest suppliers possible, but having the right number. Enough to reduce risk and maintain competition, but few enough to allow strong relationships and coordination. Fifth, we covered supplier development. This is when a firm actively helps suppliers improve through training, shared expertise, and joint projects. Instead of constantly replacing suppliers, companies often improve strategic partners because the supply chain competes as a network. Sixth, we examined supply base risk. Risks can come from politics, markets, logistics, finance, or the supplier's own stability. Firms must evaluate both the probability of disruption and its impact, then prepare responses in advance. Seventh, we addressed supply chain fraud. Fraud is often hidden and can be costly, so companies rely on ethical culture, separation of duties, monitoring systems, and audits to both deter and detect fraudulent activity. Finally, we discussed sustainability in the supply base. Modern supply management is not only about cost and quality. Firms now evaluate environmental impact, energy usage, logistics practices, and life cycle effects when selecting and managing suppliers. So overall, supplier management today is much broader than purchasing. It combines performance measurement, relationship management, risk management, ethics, and sustainability.